Good morning and welcome to Jobcare. We are running the session this morning for Jobnet. Our working group is 47, and we're going to be kind of focusing on CVs this morning. I hope you've all had a great weekend and that you're ready to start this Monday morning and get going kind of with some action and some kind of positive steps towards kind of advancing your toolkit and getting you to a place where that CV is ready to go hand in and apply for work. This morning we have with us Peter Johnson. Peter has been involved with Jobcare for a long time now. He's currently the chairman of the board, and he helps to kind of liaise with volunteers and with kind of external companies to help them to get the most out of their employees, but then be able to support us and engage with us and help us to help job seekers. Peter initially was the kind of brainchild behind Jobnet, which started about 10 years ago now, and he's been instrumental in kind of helping to get Jobnet virtual and online, and in the kind of the current setup that we have, we're able to use Zoom for virtual sessions as well as to kind of have some of the content. Today I've asked Peter to speak to us about CVs and CV prep. And genuinely, like, out of all the people that I've seen, and I've probably seen kind of in excess of 25 job nets at this point, and different people speaking on CVs, this is the best talk I've seen on CVs. So we keep asking him to come back. Unfortunately, he keeps doing a really good job, so we keep inviting him back because it's genuinely engaging. It's full of information. It's full of great tips and tactics to have your CV stand out and be kind of unique and but also be you, and get that across. Good morning, Peter. How are you?
Hi, Rolly. Great to see you.
Great. Lovely to see you. How was your weekend?
Not too bad. Did a bit of DIY, which is something I love doing at the moment. Did a lot during the lockdown.
Great. Thank you for coming to join us. I gave a little bit of a kind of top and tail introduction there. What's brought you to this point of kind of working with Jobnet and at the point where you're helping us today?
Well, I had a career in the civil service. I was a teacher for 20 years. Then I went into the civil service. Then I took early retirement about 4 years ago. So I'm just about to hit 65, and I just felt I needed to give something back. So been working with Jobcare actually for about 10 years, both in a full-time and a voluntary capacity. And right at the moment, I'm basically a house husband because my wife is a principal of a school for blind children, and I'm the handyman and general dog's body over there, and I cook all the meals, which is a new part of my my skills. I enjoy doing it.
It's so I love that about you, Peter, and I love the fact that you're kind of just highlighting the fact that we never stop learning and growing and evolving and changing, and there's always new phases to our life, so it's great to have that there. I'm just going to say there's quite a few people on already this morning. So Amin, Mark, Antoinette, Jorge, Helen, Tony, Maeve, Michelle, John, Aileen, Lordina, Paul, Pat, Bernadette. Loads of people have already said hi, just in the comments. So there's quite a few people there. It's a very active group this morning. Oh, that's great. Thanks. Just pop some of those up. Let's see. Yeah, so it's great to see all those people are already on and they're already engaging, set up and ready to, kind of make some positive actions kind of first thing on a Monday morning. Now, as I've already said, Peter, you're here to speak to us about CVs. You're going to give us a presentation, and there'll be an opportunity for people to pop questions up during the session. If anything really pertinent comes up, I might kind of come in and ask. You can also see the chat there as well if people are responding to you. But we'll aim to have kind of a Q&A at the end where people are able to, we'll be able to kind of store up some of the questions and we'll ask you when they come along. How's that sound?
That's great, Rolly. Yeah, ready to rock.
Great. If I can hand over to you then. Thanks. Peter,
I left it off.
hi, Peter. Sorry, we lost your sound there for most of that.
No problem. You can see my picture there.
You can see your picture, yeah. Yeah.
And that was on the wall behind me, so I decided I'd take it down because it was too distracting. But what you see now is a hook, not a fly, behind me on the wall. Anyway, good morning, everybody. What I'm going to try and do in the next 45 minutes is to give you my best advice on how to write an effective CV. But before I start, I just want to, really acknowledge that it is very tough at the moment. And I was looking for some stats as to, what was happening to job vacancies. The best stats I could get were from the BBC back in August, which is not too long ago. And you can see there's been a 60% drop in job vacancies. And there are more people looking for the fewer vacancies, 80% increase in applicants per vacancy. Now, that reminds me of when I was first involved in Jobcare and when we started Jobnet back in 2008, 2010. And it seems like it's happening all over again. And during that time, a lot of people were leaving Ireland, and we were listening to what the government was saying and what the social welfare was saying. And an unwritten code was that you had a choice of riding out the recession, retraining, reinventing yourself, or relocating. Now you can see there that the fourth one is not an option at the moment. So I'm asking the question, as we move into this presentation, what option would you be taking there? Do you intend to ride out this current crisis? Will you be retraining? Will you think about reinventing yourself? So there are jobs out there, and I did a further bit of research last night just to check. I asked myself the question, what jobs are most in demand at the moment and will be most in demand in the next couple of months to a year? And I thought that was important to find out, because it's really key that when we start looking for jobs and are looking for jobs, that we are fishing in the right pool where there are actually vacancies. And this is what I found out once again from BBC. So it's UK. I couldn't find a comparable stat for the Republic of Ireland. But you can see here there are 5 big areas. One is the whole IT space, e-commerce, for example, because so many companies, shops are now doing most of their sales online. It's obvious that warehousing and logistics is a big area now. Just think about Amazon. How many of us have been ordering stuff online, driving, tracking the orders, etc. And the third one there, supermarkets, grocery, not the retail city centre shops, but the food shops. And lots of jobs there. For example, SuperValu have been hiring, Tesco have been hiring, mainly people packing shelves, people at the till, but also looking after online orders. And I'm sure you've seen a lot more delivery vans with SuperValu or Tesco on it coming up your street. My son works from home, and I would say about 3 times a week, a Deliveroo arrives at the door to deliver his lunch or whatever he's looking for. So the fast food sector is also very much in demand. And finally, cleaners, people coming to workers' homes to clean the place when they're gone, or commercial cleaning. I know my wife, as I said, who's a principal in a school, she's hired a lot more commercial cleaners who wash down and disinfect the school at the end of the day. So those are areas. Now, one of the things I noticed about that is that quite a lot of these may well be below your pay grade. And certainly, if I were in your position now, I could possibly look at the area of e-commerce, because I have some web development skills, but I would find it hard to make it there. I'd have to do quite a bit of retraining, quite a bit of networking. The other ones, I could work in a supermarket. And I remember my brother, during the bank strike, if you remember right back to then, he couldn't find a job for, the banks were on strike for 3 months. So what he did was he actually did some DIY, did handyman jobs. So I suppose the question I'm asking myself is, if I were in your position right now, would I be willing to try something in 2, 3, 4, or 5, which may well be below my pay grade? An interesting question to ask. And going back to what I said about retraining or relocation, reinvention, but also the more important one, that is to ride out. If you're in a position, and you may be in a position right now where the only option for you is to ride out the current situation, and we do know from our feedback that people are taking a lot longer to get back into work. So what are you going to do as you ride out this particular situation? Will you ride it out by retraining yourself, or might you consider a job that is below your pay grade, but will just keep you occupied and keep you going? Or might you try some voluntary work? I just thought I'd throw those things in there, which I thought were fairly interesting. This is LinkedIn's list of top global jobs. The left-hand side are the top jobs in demand in August 2020. And you look down there again, and you can see there's a real mixture of what I would call maybe non-professional jobs, and then there's some highly professional jobs. And the right-hand side was really fascinating, and those are the top 10 jobs for remote working. I won't go through these in detail, but I'll be sending out the presentation. You can have a look over that. And maybe some of the things I've just said might be something you could discuss in your Zoom groups, either tomorrow or on Thursday. Okay, so what does all this mean? Before we start on to CVs, I looked at 25 CVs belonging to Jobnet 47. I didn't see any more than 25. I think there's 60 of you about in the program, so hopefully you'll be sending your CV in. So I took a look at the 25 CVs, and out of the 25, I reckon that 6 of them needed serious rewriting. I'm not going to name any names. 12 of them are competent, but I still think they wouldn't pass the more discerning hiring manager or HR professional. 7 of them really stood out and still needed a bit of tweaking, a couple of typos and things like that. But I want to name those people now. I'm not going to show their CVs, but I want to congratulate Bernadette, Cassia, Maeve, Martina, Michelle, Paul C, and Paul R. Well done. And I hope you don't mind, I've used little bits of your CVs. They will be anonymous, but I've used little bits of them as examples of good practice in terms of CV writing. So, do you know the answer to this question? How much time on average does a recruiter spend on your CV? The amounts vary, but the average is 6 seconds. So think about this. A second is the length of time it takes you to count to 5. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the reader has stopped reading your CV. So what are the implications of that? Who is the first person to read your CV? Here's a question for you. So your CV goes into a company. You send it in as an attachment to your email, or you've used an application process for the company online. So who looks at the CV first? Is it the junior recruiter? Is it the hiring manager? Or is it a bot? So by a bot, I mean an applicant tracking system. So think about this. If your CV goes into a company where they actually read CVs, it's very unlikely that the senior HR person or the hiring manager will be the first person to view your CV. It's much more likely to be the junior recruiter. And think about them and their position. They may be only a few months in the company. They're afraid to make a mistake. They're being asked to shortlist down to maybe 10 or 12 CVs to hand to the hiring manager or to hand to the senior recruiter. They are making sure they don't make a mistake. What if they let a CV through that doesn't really meet the grade, and the hiring manager says, what are you wasting my time with this CV? Or they might say something more cruel. What sort of a wally did you send to me? A lot of companies are now using an applicant tracking system. So is your CV seen, first of all, not by a person, but by a computer? Here's an example. So I just picked up this particular website for Lidl. If you look at the big red arrow up there, you can see that the recruitment for Lidl is being managed by a program called Candidate Manager. So when you apply for Lidl, your CV goes into an ATS, an applicant tracking system. So what are the implications of these things for your CV? Well, first of all, it really has to be targeted. That means a different CV for every job you apply for. And I want to stop there because that sometimes can have the implications that you rewrite your CV or write a completely new CV for every job you target. No, it's not like that. Most of you have sent in a basic CV, and that's fine to have one. It's a bit like Lego. So you remember when you were building Lego as a kid, you had green pieces, you had red pieces, yellow pieces, white pieces, you had 4s, you had 6s, you had 2s, and you could use those in different combinations to build a house. And then you break down the house and you use the same pieces to rebuild another object. So your CV contains Lego pieces, and it's the same amount of Lego pieces, but you take them down and you rearrange them in a slightly different order depending on the job you're applying for. So that's what I mean about targeting. The second point is that a CV, particularly at the moment, has to stand out. So as I said at the beginning, 80% more people are looking for 60% less jobs. That means your CV has to stand out in some way. And one of the best ways for you to make your CV stand out is to try and put in specific achievements. If you can imagine you're going for a job as an accounts assistant or an accountant, you may have 40 people who have exactly the same qualifications as you applying for a similar job. How do you stand out amongst those 40 people? Well, one way is to show that you have specific achievements that show that you've achieved far and above what the other people applying have done. I'll talk a bit about that in a few minutes. The second thing is, if a reader only spends 6 seconds on your CV, where have you got all the important information? Is it on page 1? Is it on page 2? I will mention that I saw one CV where the only thing on the first page was the word curriculum vitae. I saw another CV that had a picture of a man holding a briefcase on the front of it. So what are you doing on the first page of your CV? What's right at the top? I'm calling these hotspots because those are the things that will catch the eye of the reader. So make sure all your hotspots, the most important facts about yourself, the things that make you stand out, make sure they're on the first page. And that's why I wouldn't advise you to put your educational qualifications on the first page, unless you're going for a university, a university job or something like that. The reason why is you've got to get your work experience, your solid work experience, right up there on the first page, because that's what most of the readers will be looking for. Where have you worked before? What have you done? And what have been your achievements? It goes without saying that your CV would have to be free of errors. And you can get other people to look at your CV. You can do spell check. But watch out, because some of the modern computers have American spell check, not UK, Irish spell check. And the last point there, where possible, it should be warm. Now, maybe you're wondering what I mean about that. Well, what I mean by having a warm CV is that, if possible, you would have a recommendation, so that the CV is recommended by someone in the company or somebody who knows a hiring person in the company. So you get a recommendation very often based on networking. Let me introduce you to Barry Groom. So Barry Groom is a friend of mine, and you can see he's a funds manager in Bank of New York Mellon. So Barry Groom worked for his family company, which was Groom's Vegetables. I think it's been taken over by another company now. But he wanted to better himself. He was doing the financial records and the auditing or whatever he had to do in Groom's. But he decided to go to Dublin Business School to really develop his career. And when he came out of Dublin Business School, he started to apply for jobs. And he saw a job that he would like in Bank of New York Mellon. He applied for it, sent the application in, and of course, what do you think? Nothing came back. It just went into the black hole. But a few Sundays later, he was on the Gaelic pitch watching his son play Gaelic, and he was shouting for his team, and there was another man on the sideline shouting for the other team. And they got chatting, and of course, what happens when you meet? You ask each other, well, what do you do? And Barry said, well, I'm looking for work. And the other man said, well, I work for Bank of New York Mellon. That's very interesting, said Barry. I just applied there a couple of weeks ago, didn't hear anything back. So what do you think happened? The next day, the Bank of New York Mellon man went into the bank, went to HR, looked for the guy's CV, handed it to HR and said, there's a guy you should talk to. So a warm CV developed just out of a chance networking contact. What do I mean by achievements and about quantified? Well, I've picked these actually out of some of the CVs that I looked at for Jobnet 47 last night. The key thing here is that these people are giving a very clear indication that they have made achievements and that they have achieved over and above other people maybe who are applying for the same job. So you just have a quick look at those and see, well done, whoever put those in. Great points to put in your CV. And you might notice too that two of the people have quantified. So let's say, for example, you want to put in on your CV, I supervise staff. Well, you could have supervised 10 staff, you could have supervised 500. It's important to quantify. And of course, if you can talk that up, and if you have supervised 500, put it in for goodness sake. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes the first person to see your CV is a bot, or more correctly, an applicant tracking system. Or how do you get your CV past the ATS, or how do you get it past that junior recruiter? Well, the key thing is to mirror match. And the best help you have for getting your CV past those two people is to mirror match. And the best way to do it is to look at the job ad. So here's a job ad that I picked out. Now, it was a few months ago when, in fact, there were events still happening. So I apologize for not having a very up-to-date one. But here's a job I picked up out of Indeed for an events coordinator / project manager. And these are this is the job spec. These are the things that they're looking for, the type of person, the skills and competencies that they're looking for. So what I've done here is I've highlighted a couple of things which I'm going to make sure I put into my CV. A degree in business, 2 years experience, experience and proficiency in MS Office, excellent verbal and written communication skills, organized, detail-orientated individually and in a team. So I'm going to make sure that in my CV, I mention all these things. For example, I could say that I have 2 years experience in the events industry. I have a qualification in business and so on. So what happens to the ATS or to the bot, it scans your CV for all these keywords. So wouldn't it be very strange if in your application you left those keywords out? And not just similar words, but the exact words. Because as you know, bots look for the exact words. Or if it's a junior recruiter looking at it, they have a checkbox and they say, does the person have 2 years experience? Have they got a degree in business? And if they check 8 out of 10 boxes, they might consider putting the person forward. So make sure you tick their boxes. Here are the ones I've picked out of that particular job ad. I'm going to make sure that of all the things I put in on my CV, I'm going to put in these exact things that mirror match the job spec. I hope that makes sense. It's a very simple exercise for you to do. Look at the job spec, look at your CV, and do a matching exercise and make sure you have reproduced on your CV the elements that they're looking for in the job spec. So, 2 ways to check the ATS system. I found 2 websites they're American, but there are ways in which you can just check, would your CV pass an applicant tracking system? They go through the key skills. In JobScan, what you can do is you can upload your CV and upload the job spec. You get 3 free goes, and it comes back to you and tells you how well your CV is matched that particular job spec. In topresume.com, I tried that a couple of months ago, and they actually come back to you with an email saying, "Hi, Peter, we've looked at your CV and we've identified X, Y, and Z, how you would get past the ATS." Here's what came back to me from the topresume.com, one of the pages. I sent out a spurious CV, and I got this back. And it told me how well my CV fitted the job spec that I put in. And here's what I got back from JobScan. And you can see all the X's. It means that I didn't put in all the things that were in the job spec that were mentioned. I only put in one key word, which is negotiating. So that really helped me in my application. So there's the 2 ones, topresume.com and jobscan.co. I wouldn't religiously depend on them, but just ways to help you to improve your CV, to help it get past the applicant tracking system. Okay, moving on. About 10 years ago, the main way you found a job was by sending in your CV attached to an email. But in the last few years, it's not about finding a job, it's more about being found. And I wanted to mention this because not only do you get a job by looking for an ad, finding the ad, replying to it, but people are looking for you as well. And I'm sure if you're on LinkedIn, you've got these messages saying, people are looking at your profile, people are looking at your profile. Now, LinkedIn gets a lot of its revenue by selling its product to recruiters. And here's what the recruiter's desktop looks like. So as you can see in the top left-hand corner, it says LinkedIn Recruiter. So recruitment companies are paying a lot of money for this feature. I think they have to pay for every candidate that they select. So in this particular case, if you look carefully on the left-hand side, you'll see that the recruiter is looking for an engineer, plus that they're a graduate research assistant. And in their first search, they ended up with 39,000 candidates worldwide. They found that 9,000 were more likely to respond, 5,000 open to new opportunities, and 545 have some connection with the company that's doing the recruiting. That might tell you a bit about how important it is to brand yourself on your LinkedIn profile, how important it is to have very important keywords and key phrases that will attract the search. Now, I know that you're having an input from LinkedIn next week, so just bear that in mind as you're considering your CV, and in this case, your online CV, which is your LinkedIn profile. You can turn it around, however, because there's a cheap way that recruiters can use to find people online. And I recommend that you go to this site. Now, it's called RecruitM, but the URL is recruitin.net. And when you come to this site, you can actually find people who are in the work sector that you're interested in. You probably know yourself, if you were, we'll say, a graphic designer, and you typed in graphic designer to Google, you'd end up with companies and recruiters looking for graphic designers. But I'm looking for somebody to network with. And so if I put graphic designer under the job title there, and then I click find the right people on LinkedIn, I end up with something like this. In this case, I was looking for a marketing manager. So now I know that all these people here are in Ireland, and they're in the role that I'm interested in, and they're in senior positions in these roles. So now I have an option of clicking on these people and taking a risk and connecting with them on LinkedIn. Just a little way of turning the tide, turning the tables in terms of recruiting that can be very useful for you. You can not only link with these people, but you can check their background, how they got into that particular role, and maybe do they have connections that you know that you can get introductions to them through. Okay, there's not just one type of CV, there are a couple of different types. And I wanted to just ask this question because I know that a lot of you may well be not quite as mature as I am, but maybe in that sort of 45 to 55 bracket. Or I know that many times we meet people who are coming to a point where they decide, well, actually, I'm not sure if the career I had for the last 20 years is really for me, and I want to change, I want to transition. So the most typical CV is a chronological CV. That is, it has the details of your work experience in reverse chronological order. However, there's another type of CV called a competency-based CV. And it's something you might consider if you are changing your career, or as many people in the last few years have had, is you've had a 6-month contract here, maybe a 2-month contract there, and the last job you had doesn't really relate to what your career goals are. So maybe you've had a few gaps in your work history as well, and you find it hard to explain them. Or you may be concerned that your age might come against you. So a competency CV looks a bit like this. Instead of focusing on your work experience to begin with, you actually list your key skills, your key competencies. And here's an example of somebody who has created a competency-based CV. A question for you, do you actually use action words in your CV? Now, I've noticed looking at some of the 25 CVs that some people have definitely done this. These are examples of power words that you put in the bullet points in your CV: addressed, advanced, shared, devised, developed, deployed, organized. You can see these words really indicate that you have been actively working in your organization and have achieved. They're what I call power words. Now, I think we'll be able to send that copy out to you. I didn't make it up myself. You can see there it was from Indeed, but I've added a few extra words to it. So use action words in your CV when you're writing your bullet points. Here's a funny question. Do you have any widows or orphans on your CV? Now, if you were in the print industry or in the writing industry, you'd know what I mean. But it's just a small point. Here's an example of a widow. So this is the bottom of a page of somebody's CV, and you'll see that on the top they give their employment between 2014 and 2016. But at the bottom you can see a previous employment. It's where they worked, when they worked, but there's no bullet points. So that's a widow. They should have pressed return and moved that PMO specialist onto the next page, just for the ease of reading. This is an orphan. It's the opposite way around. So here you can see that the final bullet point of a particular role is the top part of this page. The person should have tried to bring that back to the previous page, maybe by widening the margin slightly or removing some unnecessary spaces in the previous page, the first page of their CV. Next question. Do you only fire your silver bullets? And when you run out of bullets, do you stop firing? Now, one of the CVs of the 25 I read had 15 bullet points for a particular role. And I think if you have that many, you're probably running out of bullets and should stop firing, because the reader, I think, would get a bit bored reading 15 bullet points. If you can't be more concise and bring it down to about 7, you're wasting space, you're making the reader switch off, you're not really hitting the person with those hotspots that I talked about earlier on your CV. So what do I exactly mean by silver bullets? Well, let me give an example. This guy here works in Subway. He's an assistant manager in Subway, and he wants to better himself or improve himself. And he sees an advertisement for the role of a manager in a top restaurant, and he decides to apply for that role. So as he looks back over his career and his current role as an assistant manager in Subway, he can name these 10 different bullet points that he could add to his CV. But which of these are silver bullets, and which of these are just things that somebody as assistant manager would always do? When I'm teaching this in Jobcare, I'd ask people to pick out the top 5 bullets that would be the silver bullets in this particular list. So as you just look at it now, can you pick out yourself what bullets would be your top 5 that would give an indication that would make you a best applicant for that particular role, not your current role, but the role as a manager of a top restaurant? Would you choose took orders and served customers? Would you choose operated till? No. Here's the ones that I selected. So you can see there the management is highlighted. Health and safety. Key holder indicates trustworthy. Made up accounts, once again, trustworthy. Ordered daily and weekly supplies, oversaw that the business didn't lose money by ordering the wrong things. Just in terms of bullet points, just pull back a few. In some of the CVs that we've read over the years, we always collect what we call howlers, and I've picked some interesting ones for you. It's very hard to make a CV presentation fun, and I just thought I'd add these ones here, which were seen as CVs. I'm excellent at multitasking. I think that should be multitasking. I enjoy cooking Chinese and Italians. Emptying wash bowels. This person was describing their role as a hairdressing assistant, so they were emptying wash bowls. I also speak German and spinach. Proven ability to track down and correct errors. What a terrible spelling mistake to make. I'm a rabid typist. I wouldn't like to meet a rabid typist. After receiving advice from several different angels, I've decided to pursue a new line of work. This is one came in one of the more recent job nets. I thought I'd interview this person just for fun because of what they said. Quite the professional at falling down a mountain. So I'm going to just take a little break now. I want to talk about how do you write your bullet points. And one of the important things is consistency. Question here is, do you mix up your ings with your eds? So I've written down here, serving, served. If you are working at present, you use the ing word in your bullet points. If you are working somewhere in the past, you use the ed, the past, and try and not mix them up. Another typical mistake is you write down something like bank reconciliation, which is a very passive way of saying, I reconciled bank statements. I'm going to stop now very quickly. I'm going to move on very shortly to talk about how you would write your profile in your CV. But maybe there are a couple of questions now, Rolly. Or
Peter, how you doing? Thanks very much for that. I'm a huge fan of the professional at falling down mountains because it's often that pastimes piece can be. Some people say don't put it in at all, and then I personally think you need a little bit of a flavor of the person who's coming in. Would they connect with our team? Will they fit in? I think is a huge question that people ask. So I remember we found that one a couple of job nets ago. And we're like, oh, that's really good. Well, very well done. It's great. Actually, we do have a couple. There's a couple of questions. There's one that I'd love to get to. Right at the beginning, you kind of mentioned kind of retraining and some of the areas that picked up. And Julie actually said, I'm prepared to do anything just for something to do, but applied for a supermarket and was told I was overqualified. How do I get past that? Do you have any advice on that one?
My goodness, You have me there for a moment, Julie. I'm not going to just say any old thing. I do know that sometimes when someone says you're overqualified, it has got to do with the way you've approached that particular role. I think that one answer there is to try and get talking to somebody in that particular place. It's not going to work by sending in a high-powered CV. You will have to maybe dumb down your CV, to excuse that expression. But I think the best way of getting through is to actually do some approaching of people.
Yeah, I also think that if you're applying for a role kind of just on the shop floor, then it's potentially, you just need to list the roles you've done and don't necessarily go into, and potentially if there is any customer service or kind of client facing or professional facing ones, that would be appropriate roles to share those. But I think also, yeah, I think you're right. If you're able to hand your CV to your neighbor who works in the same supermarket and goes, she's really reliable, really dependable, she'll show up, she'll be here at 6 in the morning or 10 o'clock at night, whatever we need, and that's the person we need, and there's a CV. Then I would agree. I would agree with that. I also think that's probably the advice for any role, right?
Well, I have to say I'm really impressed by your willingness to go for anything. I think that's a real, shows a real positive attitude. And if that supermarket said no, I'm sure there's got to be opportunities for you. Just plug in there, hang in there, and don't be discouraged by just one rejection in that area. Personally, I don't like giving advice to you because I'm in a privileged position. That I'm retired, I'm financially secure, so I'm not going to say do any job. But I think if I was in your position, I couldn't stay not working. I'd have to be doing something, and just my own mental health, and just to have a sense that I'm actually making something to support my family. So go for it. Don't give up on that. Keep trying.
And just quickly, just to tap on one that Jorge said. He says, I think I'm not exactly sure which information he's referencing, but he goes, do you put the information in your CV or your presentation letter? Like, where do you see the line between the information you put on your CV and the information that you put in a cover letter?
Cover letters are very interesting. I don't want to go into this at great length, but as you probably know, that some recruiters just don't bother reading cover letters. It just gets dumped. Although I do notice that in the jobs boards like Indeed or Irish Jobs, there's always a space at the end for a personal statement, which I think is actually your cover letter. I would see cover letters as the opportunity to explain why you're applying for that job and maybe to cover some gaps. That's why it's called cover letter. It covers your CV. So you use a cover letter as an opportunity for saying things that you can't say in detail on your CV. The reason why you're transitioning, why you think that even though you haven't worked in that industry, you have comparable or you have relevant transferable skills.
And thanks for that. There's also a follow-up question from Elaine as well. And I sometimes matched my cover letter with my job spec, but more precisely than the CV. Is that a big mistake? So they're matching the cover letter. They're keeping the more generic CV, and they're matching the cover letter.
What I would do is I would write down those key competencies and experience and requirements that are on the job spec on one side of an A4 piece of paper, draw a line down, and then decide what you're going to say and where you're going to say it. I do think that you've got to get that key information into your CV, because that is the currency that the recruiter is going to use. The cover letter, as I said just earlier there, may not be read at all, or maybe just used as a discriminator. They may use it, for example, if they're looking for somebody who has good English, good communication skills, they might read something into that. So I would say that could be a mistake, not to be exact in terms of what you put down in your CV, and make sure it matches the job spec.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think certainly knowing my experience as a hiring manager, that the first thing I will go to when somebody hands me a kind of pack for interview, the first thing I'll look at is the CV and have a brief scan of it, just to see how, like, to get a sense of the person, you know. And then if I'm interested, I think I'd probably go ahead and read the cover letter afterwards. After choosing that, I'm going to invest the time it takes to read the cover letter as well. If that makes sense. But it also, I think that you're able to get a lot more personality into the cover letter. It doesn't have to be as generic and kind of just fact-based as the CV would be. Right. Ready to go to part two, Peter?
Okay, here we go. So this
Right,
is kind of
two, thanks.
This is going to be a bit more technical. It's got to do with some advice is how to write your profile. I noticed that some people had written a profile and some people had no profile on their CV. I think that's really important. If we're talking about the 6 seconds, I think it's important to have a profile that really hits the spot as best as possible. So here we go. Guys, can you see that presentation? Good. So how do you write your personal profile? I was just double checking whether I spelled personal correctly. I have, thank goodness. So what is it? About 50 to 60 words, grabbing the attention, a summary of your unique selling points, and very much related to the job ad. So thinking back to what I said previously, if you look at the job ad and you see the spec, the skills they're looking for, the qualifications, a very good tip is to ask yourself, as you read the job spec, what are the 3 most important things they're looking for? Not always possible to do it.
Sorry, Peter, could you just make that full screen for us?
Of course,
That's
yeah.
super helpful. That'd be great. Actually, thank you.
Yeah. Well, is that better?
Perfect. Great. Lovely. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay. So yeah, just going back to that, being based on the understanding of the job ad, it's so important to put in the top things, the key things that the employer is looking for, and try and get those and weave those into your profile. I'm not saying that they shouldn't appear elsewhere in your CV, but I think try and get those top 3 things into your profile. And they say that the key things that the employer is looking for are not always on the job ad. Sometimes you have to read into it. So for example, a financial job, you may begin to see that they're actually looking for a safe pair of hands. Or maybe they're looking for somebody who represent the company well. So have a good think about and read that job spec very carefully. Read it, reread it, think about it, and ask yourself the question, what are the 3 most important things they're looking for? Most profiles are written in a 3rd person. In other words, you're writing them as if you're talking about somebody else. Some people just say, I am a, and I don't mind that. As long as you're consistent, I think it's important. If written well, it may convince the employer to read on, but if it's written badly, it might be the last thing they read. So some people read the profile, decide whether or not they'll read on. So I have a couple of very simple tips. If you haven't got a profile in your CV or are thinking of rewriting it and trying to make sure that it is as impactful as possible. So I've 4 things to think about: head, hands, heart, and direction. So try and get a bit of each of these into your profile. The head is basically who you are, what you've learned, your qualifications, and your occupation. Hands, what you can do, what skills, what key skills that they're looking for in the job ad, what can you slip those into your profile? Something about your heart, the type of person they're looking for. What do you have to bring? What type of person are you? How you will enhance the role, how you will get on with people, how you'll communicate. And one thing that's very often left out in a profile, and I've noticed it in the 25 CVs that I read, the 20 that had profiles, I think only 3 of them had some indication of what they were actually looking for. So if you're applying for a job as an administrative assistant, for goodness sake, put in that you're looking for a job as an admin assistant. But finally, if you're putting down what you're looking for, so very often you might see now seeking a role as a, but it's not just what you're looking for, also put in what you can bring to the company. So you're saying now seeking a role as a, so that I can add to the company's bottom line. Here's a way you might start your profile then. The who you are. This is the head and your experience. So a financial controller with 8 years experience in the funds industry and so on. What you have, your qualifications, certs and licenses. Qualified in, holder of, successfully completed, certified in. What you can do, these are your skills. So you can talk about your skills, your proven ability, your excellent, whatever those skills are. And these, of course, are the skills or competencies that are matching the job spec as you read it. Don't lie, but make sure you try and get in as many comparable skills as you possibly can. And once again, as I said earlier, use the exact words that they used in the job ad. For example, if the job ad contains the word client, you should use the word client and not customer, and vice versa. And here are your personal qualities. Which 3 or 4 personal qualities would you put in to your profile? And finally, your objective and what you're contributing. And that makes up your profile. So I haven't said who this is, but I've picked some profiles from some of the 25 CVs, and I like this one here. The reason I like this one here, and take a bow, whoever you are, is that they've very clearly indicated the role that they're looking for. You can see that they've written this in the third person. They've included skills, they've included personal qualities, and probably the only thing that they haven't included is that they're now seeking and what they can bring to the company or to the role. So maybe that should be added at the end. Here's another one. And what I like about this is this profile has definitely said what they can bring to the role. So I've just highlighted that at the end. But once again, you can see that it's short, snappy, it's written in the third person. It's got not only some qualities and skills, it also has an achievement there. You see there, delivered double-digit growth in FX swap. I have no idea what FX swap trading businesses is, but I'm impressed by delivering double-digit growth. That's an achievement put into the profile as well as everything else. I like this one. It mixes third person with first person, but I just thought that it really demonstrates this person's profession, their skills, and their personal qualities. I highlighted galvanized just to whoever you are. That's an American spelling, so you missed a spell check there. Also, I noticed that sometimes when people are writing their profile, they write it like a continuous stream of consciousness and forget the punctuation. And my best tip is that you put in a punctuation when, as you're reading it, you take a breath. So you can see there at the very last sentence, I think, needs some punctuation. So a recent graduate of the Innovation Academy at UCD, breath, this transformative learning experience. So I think that should be a colon rather than a comma. I love the idea at the end here, showing that this person is up to speed and is thinking about the needs of businesses in the future. Love that, beautifully written. And the reason I like this one is it's quite different. Now this was somebody in a previous Jobnet, but I love it's written in the personal pronoun. I love the point where she says, I speak strategy, innovation, and difficult customer. I know it doesn't grammatically make sense, but I think it's really good. So I hope some of those are examples of profiles that you can use, and you can adapt them and use them for your own personal use. So that's it. I hope that's been of some help to you. It's been my best advice. I'm sure I've left things out, and I'm sure you have questions, but even if you don't, maybe take those 2 key questions I asked at the beginning. What are you going to use your time? How are you going to ride out this current challenge is COVID-19? Thanks, Rolly.
Peter, thanks very much. Much appreciated. A few people coming in straight away saying, like Tony saying, brilliant, thanks, super helpful. And Elaine and Julie were both back thanking us for the response to the questions that were asked earlier. Anne and Brendan are both saying, thanks very much, Peter, much appreciated. And Diana from Manchester, heading up our crew. Mark, it's good. While we're still here, does anyone have any specific questions about CVs or profiles that they want to ask Peter? Let me see if anyone comes up. But people have had lots of chances to do that. Peter, as always, thank you very much. Very insightful, informative, and I do like the way that you're able to bring some level of entertainment to it as well. So,
yeah, just want to pick up one question there, which is quite good from Pat. Hi, what are your thoughts re small photo on front page of your CV? One of the things I noticed is that in different countries, there are different CVs are written in different ways in different countries. I noticed in Latin American countries and also in the Europass that people in European countries use, photographs often included. I would say not needed on CVs in Ireland, unless you're looking for a job as a model or an actor, because putting a picture in your CV, there can be 2 reactions from the employer. One, they might think you're so attractive and handsome that they wouldn't like you around, or 2, they don't like the look of you for some reason. So I would say photograph on your LinkedIn profile, but not a photograph on your CV.
Yeah, they both offer people an opportunity for prejudice. So,
yeah, exactly.
And also a lot of the people things that people are suggesting, like taking your date of birth off. People need to work out how old they are. They can look at like when you went to school, when you did your leaving, when you left college. But also I've seen more and more people advising not even to put your address on it. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's a thinking and an understanding that if the question isn't answered on your CV, that somebody will jump to the assumption. And the assumption might be, hey, we're hiring in Swords, your address is in Bray, who's going to drive from Bray to Swords every day for a job? Now, the thing is, actually lots of people will, but somebody who doesn't kind of think that through fully mightn't necessarily, it might be very easy, way for them to go, oh, no, move it on to the no pile. Another question there from Antoinette. She's wondering how many pages? It's an age-old question. What's your take on this one?
Well, I've noticed that some tech companies like Google only want a 1-page CV. I spent some time out with eBay, who are also a tech company, and they said it didn't really matter as long as what was in the CV was consistent and relevant. So I would say that around about 2 pages might be average, but if you have a long career, it's well worthwhile writing a longer CV. And also, I think if you're looking for an academic position, you may have to include quite a lot of information about papers you've written and so on at the end. So I'd say around about 2 pages, but I will give you this one piece of advice. White space is very important in a CV. You might notice that in books and novels that you read, there's a big white margin around the text. Don't try and squeeze your CV into 1 page or 2 pages by reducing the size of the font or by decreasing the size of the margins. It just doesn't look right.
One of my colleagues here yesterday was saying that he was having a conversation with somebody advising them on, and they're like, oh, my CV is brilliant. 27 pages.
A novel. I do have a question to put out to you guys, actually, and to the facilitators, because It was interesting when I was looking at the CVs last night. By the way, there was one CV that didn't have any contact details, so please address that, because if you send that CV, it might be a challenge for the people who read it to contact you. But the question that came to me was, should you send in your CV as a PDF or as a Word file? I don't have an answer to that. I know that the Word files that went into our SharePoint jumped all over the place. I had to download them onto my desktop. But I noticed also that the PDFs were quite small. I had to enlarge them, twist them around left, right, and center. So I don't know. Has anyone got a point of view on that?
I'd love to hear from some people. In my experience, it seems to be that every system that people are using and every company is different. Some people are very much, it's got to be on Word, but interesting to hear what people come up. While there's no answers back from that yet, but Diana suggests sending in both. And then Antoinette says, I think it's Word for the tracking systems.
Yes, of course.
There's also, Mark also asked a question when you're talking about the 1 or 2 page. Mark says, I've only had one job for 30 years. I don't have a big CV. I suspect he's only worked for one company for 30 years, rather than, I've had one job here I've worked for Jobcare for 3 years, and I've done way more than one job. I could probably write a CV about my 3 years in Jobcare.
Yeah, I suppose that's one answer, is that obviously within that job you probably had different roles. So you could, I've seen it in some of the CVs that I looked at last night, that people who had maybe 15 or 20 years in a particular company were able to break that down into different roles and show their progression through the company, or even how their roles changed. That's one way in which you could pad out your CV. But of course, if I was reading your CV and saw that you're in a company for a long time, I could have a negative or a positive reaction to that. The positive one could be that you're dependable, reliable, and so on. The negative one might be, well, this person hasn't got a broad experience. I would focus on the positive side of that and market yourself as somebody who's dependable. I've got the person's back. I've stuck with it, hung in there through 3 recessions. So what you say in your cover letter, what you say when you're networking, how you communicate yourself, not only within your CV, but outside, is going to be important there.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Julie makes a point that Word is a generic app that everyone has, both personal and professional, although PDF is very common, but not everyone has it.
Yeah.
I would have thought that within HR departments, they would at least have the ability to have and share PDFs, because they would be very common as part of an application. Oh, Mark, thank you so much for admitting that. He said, I once accidentally sent out his CV in Comic Sans. I'm glad. So I would suggest that everybody go now into the font folder on their computer and delete Comic Sans, just so that doesn't have to happen, and to save us all from Comic Sans.
2 things I'll just mention. One was when I started in Jobcare, my wife went back to work, and she wanted to get a job as a primary school teacher. She'd done that before, and the best piece of advice she got was, in those days you typed out your CV, you posted it in. So she was told, make sure you go to the school, arrive just as the principal is leaving, and bump into them and say, oh, I was just about to apply. Hand them the brown envelope, which the principal will put into their bag or their briefcase, and it was the first thing they'd read when they went home. The second funny thing that really happened to me was working in the civil service. There was a particular role that was advertised, and the closing date was 5 o'clock on a Friday at a particular date. And the person in the post room heard these steps running up to the front post box, and a letter going in, and then the steps running away. And it was just before 5 o'clock. So the person in the post room went out, opened up the letter, and inside was a recipe for banana bread. So what had happened apparently was the applicant had 2 envelopes in their bag, and in their hurry, they put the wrong envelope in through the letterbox. So guys, just be careful, ladies and gents, just be careful that you put in or you send in the right application on your email.
That's a great story. Thanks for that. That's great. Thank you, everyone, for jumping on. Actually, we just asked Elaine. I was going to end it there, but Elaine's got that question. She said, "Which font is best?" Do you have any preference on that?
Well, there are
since Mark brought that up about Comic Sans.
Yeah. Well, there are two different types of font. There's serif and sans serif. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that well, but one type of font has curly tails in it, and one type of font has not. So Times has curly tails on it. It's a more classic font. So I would say probably use the sans serif font because it's quite easy to read. So Arial, Helvetica. I wouldn't go for Times. As I said, it's very traditional.
Yeah, so you can see even the font that we're using on screen. There's no curly kind of tails on the ends of the H's or the I's. You know, and yeah, I think they stand out quite a lot. So I think they're relatively easy for people to read.
I just throw in 2 other things there. I used to work as a proofreader, and so that's why when I'm looking at CVs, I spot mistakes very easily. I noticed quite a number of the CVs didn't have spaces between some of the words. But the other thing that really annoys me, and I think takes away from the flow of your CV, is having too many capital letters or too many bold letters, changes in fonts, underlining things which don't need to be underlined, because if you notice that some fonts have a G, for example, that goes down below the line. So when you put an underline, it crosses over the G's. The little things like that are important. So reduce the amount of capitals, reduce the amount of bold, don't underline too much, but have consistency across your CV, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah, it's all about ease of reading, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's very, if you're a designer, whether that's UX or graphic designer, I think there's a different space and there's a different way in which you can present something. That's fine, but I think for most people to have it nice and relatively generic and easy to read, and to find other ways to make yourself stand out, whether that's through a different way of applying or coming up with a unique way to get to somebody, to get someone's attention, but doing it with the CV, I think it is as standard as possible. Wow them with the information that's on the page, right? Great. Peter, thank you for the time this morning. Much appreciated. Your years of wisdom of CVs, as well as your eye for detail and helping us to learn from that. Great. Peter, thank you very much for your time. We'll talk to you again.
You're welcome. Take care. All the best.
So that's the end of our session for this morning. We're looking at CVs. We'll be with all of you again tomorrow morning for our group session. We'll be jumping in there. We'll be looking a little bit more at how to build out that profile and how to be ready to either have that as a pitch to be able to share with people, to have it at the top of our CVs, to have it as part of the kind of introduction in our LinkedIn profiles. So it'll be a way in which we can dig into that. Thank you all for your time. Any questions, comments, or feedback, please email it in to the Jobnet admin email that you've been receiving your messages from. The slides for this and then the other documentation that Peter's going to share, we'll put it up on the shared site that's been linked from the email already. So they'll be able to show up there. Have a super day. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you again soon. Bye now.